So I've already gone out and gotten myself some skins shorts because I got some big old chunky thighs and I do not want to chafe away my poor thighs, all right?
So, you know, in some ways it worked, but in other ways, he may have just trained his body to require more carbohydrates over that period, which is probably not the greatest thing either.
No, exactly not.
Do what's comfortable, and if, you know, as your runs get longer and you feel good, then that's when you can kind of go harder.
Yeah, Mike, none of this is going to be comfortable for me, mate. I can tell you now.
Yeah.
Right? But I get what you're saying. You said 80-20 split, 20% working at race pace or above, 80% just cruising.
Just cruising, yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my first accountability video here. I said that I was going to find out more about what it takes to run a marathon. I've done just that. I'm going to introduce Mike in just 1 second, but I thought I was going to have to reach out to see who do I know that knows the most about endurance sports and running. So it's got to be Mike Laurie. So here's just some of the accolades that he's achieved. Basically, he's a state champion in everything, it turns out. He's a state champ for the sprint distance triathlon, Olympic distance triathlon, off-road triathlon. He's the state champ for the 5-kilometer run, the 10-kilometer run, the cross-country run. He's gotten the podium spot 10 times in the Continental Cup, including wins in Africa, Asia, North and South America, Australia, and New Zealand. And he's also had multiple top 10 World Cup podium finishes for triathlon. Did I get everything right?
You did, yeah. I actually haven't gone on the podium in a World Cup yet, but
okay.
That was I can send you that.
So that was multiple top 10 finishes with it?
Top 10 multiple times, yeah.
Multiple top 10 finishes in the World Cup. There you go. Okay. Nice one. Well, so pretty impressive resume then.
Yeah, not bad.
Not bad. So for everyone that's listening now, they know that I'm talking to a legit person that knows their stuff when it comes to running marathons here. And I'll have you know that when I told him I'm running one, he didn't just laugh at me. All right. He said he was very interested to see how this was going to go. He didn't laugh at me, which is a good start. Mike, a couple questions that I wanted to ask you was, firstly, if I'm going to run a marathon, I want to make sure it's a legit marathon. So like I was telling to Adrian, you know, I could just walk one, but that's not going to be impressive to a lot of people. So what is an acceptable time to finish a marathon? I've done a little bit of research prior, looking at the City to Surf run, the marathon distance here in WA, and the average time was around the 4-hour and 15-minute mark. But I do know that some professionals, you know, fly in for the race, and then you'll have your average Joe doing it as well. So I didn't really know if it was accurate or not. What do you think in terms of like a goal time for a marathon?
Yeah, so I think for the City to Surf, there's a few factors there. First, it's quite a hard course. It is really hilly. And towards the end, people will slow down quite a bit in comparison to, you know, one of the international marathons that are a bit faster. So, you know, a 4:15 there might actually be a 4 flat in other places. Then there's another factor in that, in general in Perth, we have quite a fit population. So, you know, a 4-hour to 4-hour 15 marathon in Perth that's a really good average for a group of people, for a city. I think most places you're looking at anywhere between 4 and 5 hours is a really strong time.
So between 4 and 5 hours, you know, around the world would be a pretty acceptable time to be running.
Yeah, 4.5 hours for any person is pretty strong, I would say.
Okay. Now, I was having to think about it as well in terms of course. I mean, I'm obviously going to run it here in WA. I probably won't run the Sea to Surf marathon route just because there's, you know, no one's stopping streets for me. They should stop all the roads for me and let me run but
I would stop them for you, Nev. I would ride next to you and, you know, tell people to stop. There's not many people right now anyway.
I was thinking of just setting a course sort of down the coast path because it's just uber long, and then just running up and down, you know, that really nice coast running and cycling sort of multi-use path that we have. So if I was to say pick the average time for the Sea to Surf, 4 hours and 15 minutes or less, that was definitely an acceptable time to run a marathon in as a goal.
I think that's an exceptional time, and I think you can definitely do it. Okay. Given the right program and, you know, given the right timing.
Perfect. So we've got the first thing done. I'm just writing notes as we go here as well. The second thing is, how long should I be training before I do it?
Okay, so probably an ideal time frame if you're starting from very limited running, is 16 weeks, I would say. But I mean, you're a reasonably fit guy. You're pretty strong and healthy. You could probably do it in 12.
But
you'd be pushing it for sure.
All right. So be pushing it in 12 weeks.
You could be pushing it to do it in 12. 16 is ideal. Anything longer than 16 to 18, you're gonna run out of juice. You're gonna get demotivated. It's too long.
All right. I think that's great. So I like the 12 to 16 range. I think that I was having to think about it before, that a 12-week block would probably be a bit more ideal for me, even though I'm not starting from a great aerobic fitness level. Is that like you're saying, even 16 weeks, 4 months, I might be running out of motivation. So I just want to get this thing done, but I do want to have a good crack at getting a good time. So if I was to say, let's say 3 months, like a 12-week schedule.
Yeah.
Right. A 12-week schedule. And then, oh my goodness, where did I write this down? Perfect. All right. So if I have a 12-week schedule, what does that look like on paper? We were having a chat before. I called Mike before to say, jump on. We'll have a quick video Skype and I'd ask him some of these questions. What does it consist of in terms of how many runs a week should I be doing? What sort of intensity level? How do I periodize my program? What does a 12-week program look like when you're training for a marathon?
So in triathlon endurance sports, we kind of talk about macro and micro cycles. And so the macro cycle is like your 4-week cycle, where you kind of do 3 hard weeks and you build through those 3 weeks. And then your final week, the 4 weeks is recovery week. And this is usually the most important week. If you don't take it easy in this week, you're not going to be able to hit the next cycle hard. So in a 12-week program, you have 3 cycles that you can hit. The final one might be shortened a little bit so you can have a bit more rest. So that's the first. And then the second is, what does this training look like week to week? And I guess in a general week, you're going to be wanting to hit 4 or 5 sessions. 2 are going to be really easy. Yeah. 2 might be, introduce some intervals into your training. Okay. And the final one in your week is definitely the most important. And the one, if you can do this every week, it's definitely the most important in getting to a marathon. And that's your long run. And so, over a 12-week period, you got 3 cycles. Every week, you're going to want to build up, you're going to want to build your program slowly. In endurance sports, we talk about don't go more than 10% of the volume of the week before. So, what does that look like? I guess your first week, you're going to want to start off. I don't know how much you run. You don't run much, do you?
Mate, I have not run since I was playing rugby back in 2016. So I've got some jiu-jitsu rolling around on the ground endurance, but not so much running endurance, mate. Yeah.
So you're going to want to start pretty short because, you don't want to get any injuries. And in a 12-week period, you could get some injuries going. Okay. So you might want to start off around 15 to 20 kilometers in your first week. And
mate, I thought you said start light. I was expecting 12 Ks here. Wait, all right. So you're about.
You're running a marathon, so.
True. So 20 Ks. I mean, is this sort of like where you would work backwards? So like, if I have 42.2 Ks, and it is 42.2 exactly, right? If I do 42.2, someone's not going to troll me, but I guess 42.25 or something. Like, no, it's 42.2.
No, 42 I think it's like 195 or something like that.
Oh, I know 42.2 just to make sure. Do I work backwards from there? Because you had said that sort of 2 weeks before the marathon, you do basically a 32K run at marathon pace.
Yeah. So your aim 2 weeks before is to hit something about 65 to 75% of the full distance. Yeah. Obviously, if you're doing a 16-week program, you can get a bit closer to your full marathon distance a few weeks out. But 12 weeks, definitely around 30K. And then, when you do the marathon, you just suffer through that final bit. I'm sure you're used to suffering. And then, working back from there, the week prior to that, you might want to do like a 25-kilometer long run. And so we'll probably start from the start here. So your first 4 weeks, you're going to try and build up from maybe a long run of about 8 kilometers. Yeah. Or 7 kilometers to a long run of, 13 or 14 kilometers.
That's by the end of the 4-week block?
End of your first 4-week block.
When you say the end, do you mean on week 3? Because that's my highest workload week?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're doing
Sorry,
a
say that
better
one
job.
more time. I want to work up to 15 Ks, you said?
Yeah, about 15 Ks at the end of your first block.
Okay. I mean, so basically, if I'm doing week 1 to 3, I'm ranging between 8 and 15 Ks on
Exactly.
weeks 1, 2, 3. On the next block, it might be between 10 and 12 starting point and 20 by week 3, something along those lines?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And then your fourth block, it's obviously going to be a shortened block. I mean, your third block is going to be shortened, right? Because after 2 weeks, you're going to want another 2-week taper instead of a 1 week easy recovery week.
Yeah.
So you might want to go, you've done 20 kilometers in your 8th week. Your 9th week, you want to back it off to maybe 12 or 13 kilometer long run. And then you want to hit probably 25 kilometers in your 10th week, no, your 9th week. And then your 10th week, that's when you're going to want to hit your proper long run around 30 kilometers.
And those long runs, that's just by themselves. Now, you were saying a really important rule, and it's a universal rule for basically everything, right? 20% of the workforce does 80% of the work. Focus on 20% of something to cover 80% of something else. It's you said 80-20 split, 20% working at race pace or above, 80% just cruising.
Just cruising, yeah. So the 80% is, the more you do at a lower volume, the more running you can do, the more your body's going to adapt. So your cells adapt. They, they're able to use more oxygen the more you run. Your efficiency increases in your stride. Your muscles increase in efficiency and, how it uses that oxygen and how you run. Just overall efficiency increases are gained from that 80% as much as they are from the other 20%. And the other thing is you also, lots of people go out and they run hard all the time, but they're not allowing themselves to recover in between each run. If you're doing 4 or 5 runs a week, you're not going to recover between each one. So you're not actually going to get the key benefits out from when you do run hard.
Right. Just a question with that as well, because we talked about 2 easy runs, 2 short runs, one long run. Does that mean for, let's say, on the long run, the 8K or the 15K, whatever it is that week, am I running that whole thing cruisy and I'm putting in my 20% at race pace during the 2 shorter runs, or do I split it up? So let's say from a 10K long run, I'll run 8K of it cruisy and the last 2 at race pace. Like, do I change in each run, or do I just keep them completely separate?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You can split it up. You split your 20% up between a few runs. So in the long run, you want to kind of finish hard so that you get used to, running at or above your marathon pace when you're fatigued. So that's definitely, it's definitely a key run to test, how you can go at the end when you're under fatigue. And then on one of your other runs, you really want to put in some interval efforts, like 1 minute on, 1 minute off during the middle part of that run. So that, you get used to going above and beyond your marathon effort, and then you recover, and then, you go again. So you get some key adaptations in your speed and efficiency there.
Perfect. I've got my Garmin instinct already here. All right. So I know I can set a little pace man, and I can track my running pace here. I can set goals and standards. So I'm quite excited about beating the pace man on the watch. Should be good.
Yeah. I'll come out and ride with you. I'll sit 2 meters in front of you and make you go a little faster.
Oof. All right. Okay. I'll hold you to that. That'll be good. With as the program progresses, because it is a relatively short build up, and I don't have an extensive running background, is it all right to increase my sessions as by in week 2 and in week 5? So for example, if my total aim for that week is to go let's say 30 odd 40 Ks worth, and I don't I can do 1 long run of 15, and I don't think I can get 2 shorter runs in. Could I break that into 3 shorter runs in week 4? So that's 4 total, and then maybe 5 runs on week 5, but then week 4 making sure I take it right back to just 2 or 3 runs to recover.
I mean, the more shorter, like smaller runs you can break it into as well, the more often you're actually getting out to run. It's probably better for your muscles and your bones to adapt to running. So shorter, breaking it into smaller runs is definitely a good thing. And then in your recovery week, you can, if you reduce the amount of runs, you reduce the total volume. It's a perfect way to recover.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so that's pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to whip this up into a bit of an Excel spreadsheet. I'll
Yeah.
splice it into this video so everyone can see, and I'll flick you through a copy as well in an email, and then you guys have a look over it and make sure I'm not lost my mind and give me the thumbs up, basically.
Yeah. Sounds good.
And then I can get into it. A few more things I wanted to touch on as well is one is when you're training for competition or for a race, or just, if you're focusing on getting better, are you tracking your calories and more specifically your carbs? I've known, I've done ketogenic diets before, which are great for endurance, but I have no plan on changing, well, unless you would recommend changing sort of diet in terms of going from carbs to keto. But if I was just to eat normally, do you track the number of carbs you're having to make sure you're getting enough glycogen back into the muscles?
To be honest, and I've actually come unstuck with this recently. I've never particularly tracked a whole lot my overall food intake, because in triathlon we generally train enough that you just eat as much as you can, as long as you're full. And I recently came unstuck with this.
I like the sound of this. I like the sound
of
it.
Like the sound of it? Yeah.
Sounds all right.
I mean, I'm training 30 hours a week. I'm doing 15, 20 sets. I'm doing 3 or 4 sessions every day, 30 to 40 hours a week. So basically eat as much as possible. And I've never been like, I'm always lean because I'm training so much. But where I did come unstuck with this was 2018, I took a step back from full-time triathlon. I trained a little bit less. And so I kind of cut back on my overall intake of food. And I focus more on getting, great high quality nutrients in my diet, eating non-processed food, that sort of thing. And, getting some good vitamins in. And then in 2019, I went back on the Canadian team. I was trying to make the Olympics last year, and I almost doubled or tripled my training volume from the previous year, but I didn't increase my net calories. And I realized this too late. And so last year I burnt out pretty hard because I was focusing on too much on, getting in good nutrients and taking my vitamins and all that sort of thing. But I wasn't actually focused enough on, increasing my intake of carbs and proteins and fats to adapt to the training load.
Okay.
And your original point was more about carbohydrates, right?
Yeah.
That's more what you're asking. So if you're going to be doing your high intensity sessions, you're going to want some pretty high quality carbohydrates in there, even sugars. Athletes, we often have gels while we're running, and before we run. So a gel is just like 20 to 40 grams of sugars, maybe with a bit of caffeine in it. So for your longer runs especially, you're really going to want something during that run or just before that run, so that your body's, your cells are loaded with like some sugar and some carbohydrates, some high quality fuel. When you're going slower, you probably want to fill up more on fats. You want to teach your body to be able to burn fats as opposed to carbohydrates as an alternate source of fuel. To do this, lots of people will, do fasted runs. They won't eat before they run. They might have a bit of caffeine in there. And sometimes for us, these can be very important runs where, you teach your body to run fasted, you teach it to burn fat, so that when you're in a race and you don't necessarily need to be burning carbohydrates because you're not going really hard, you're going slower, you want to be burning those fats. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. And I was hitting up the old textbooks before, tucked away in there, is just looking at sort of, recommended amounts of carbohydrates, for different amounts of exercise, so we can definitely have a play around with that and make sure that I'm feeling like I'm not lacking too much energy, and definitely have a play around with some fasted work as well, which I'm used to when I was doing the keto stuff. A lot of the time it was fasted or off intermittent fasting, which I actually quite enjoy. So that doesn't sound like it's too hard there. And that's interesting that with your carbo gels, it's about 40 grams of carbs and some caffeine, because I was looking at what I utilize with some of my strength athletes. If they're doing weight cuts, it's really important to, because basically there's going to be generally a part of a weight cut is a glycogen depletion, so that you get rid of all the water, sort of like naturally it's a diuretic. But then you need to reabsorb that glycogen before you compete again after you step off the scales. This is for, for weight classes. And one of the best ways is, and I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he works with I think most of the UFC fighters. He does it now with a lot of different weight cutting sports wrestlers in the US. And basically it's a 2-to-1 mix of dextrose, fructose with caffeine. So basically just sugar, caffeine, and it just is a really fast entrance for that glycogen to get sucked back into the muscles. So yeah, I was thinking about playing around with a little bit of dextrose and fructose and some caffeine, but the carbo gels, if they already do it for you, that's easier.
Yeah, well, I know that recently I did that Breaking 2 marathon, and I mean, I haven't studied a lot in terms of what the gels they were taking, but they say usually you can take on, max, I think it's 1 gram per kilogram of body weight per hour, something along those lines. So 40 to 60 grams an hour you can take on. Your stomach can handle it. Whereas in that marathon, I think the guy who set the world record, or unofficial world record, was taking up to 90 grams per hour, which is, that would be 1.5 times the body weight. And he was taking this Ineos gel. And I think you're right. It has, that fructose and the different, just allows you to absorb the sugars better, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm looking into that certain gel.
I'm going to be doing everything to max out my attempt here.
Oh yeah. Well, some of the guys in my squad in Triathlon Canada would train their bodies to take on more gels. And I'm talking to extreme extents, We would go for an hour easy ride, and I had a guy who would take two 60 gram gels in that period, and he would probably go through about 40 or 50 a week.
Oh wow!
Yeah. It was pretty crazy, but I mean, at the end of the day, in a 1 hour race, a 2 hour race, he would go through 2 or 3 gels, and I could only ever go through 1. That's all my stomach can handle. And so, in some ways it worked, but in other ways, he may have just trained his body to require more carbohydrates over that period, which is probably not the greatest thing either.
No, exactly not. But it is interesting that you said that you had that experience about burning out when you came back, because you weren't focusing on just the total amount of food needed. Because there is sort of a hierarchy when I guess when I'm talking with body composition with clients, and the most important thing is when you want to change your body composition is calories first. Then your macros, so where they're coming from, carbs, fats, sugars, and then your micronutrients, so all of your, magnesiums and potassiums, and then, your supplements down the very bottom, right? So there is that hierarchy to it. So you forgot step 1, Mike.
I know, and that's the problem is sometimes you get so too intense in, what you're exactly thinking about that you don't actually look at the bigger picture. And so often, and maybe that's what you do it every time you have an easy week. You take a step back and you look at the bigger picture. You go, hey, am I actually hitting my goals here? And I just didn't do that properly. I was too focused. I was too laser focused on one area.
Laser focused.
The funny thing is I had that exact same hierarchy written down to talk about. So you're back on there.
Oh yeah, mate. Got to stay on top of these things. I guess one of the last things I wanted to talk about was any other tips and tricks. So I've already gone out and gotten myself some Skins shorts because I got some big old chunky thighs and I do not want to chafe away my poor thighs. All right. So when I played rugby, I also wore the Skins. So I'm back on the Under Armour and Skins train there. Adrian was already laughing at me. He says I'm going to need little pasties there because he said you get chafed up under the armpits close to the chest. So I said, well, I'll get the compression gear. When I'm running, one of my friends, he's done an ultra and he does a lot of distance running through the trails, and he wears a little harness that has, you can put his phone in there, a couple gels, and it's got 2 small little drink bottles that can attach in. Have you ever used anything like that? I was looking at maybe either like a chest one or a belt or some sort of camelback, backpack. What do you suggest for these long runs? If I'm doing a 15, 20K, run in training, what's the best way to stay hydrated? Do you use any of that equipment?
For the most part, my runs in that are short enough so I can get away without those. And, I can pretty comfortably do a 25, 30K run without having any food or water. But I've done 1 or 2 trail runs where I've just carried a bottle. Some people carry them in their hand and they just fill them up when they need to. The other thing is camelbacks are great because you don't feel them, right? So the camelbacks, they're attached to your back. You just have a little straw. You can take a drink anytime, which also promotes you to actually want to take a drink. Whereas, you just want it easily accessible, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to take lots of small sips over that period. Whereas if you have something that's, you know, that's clunky, inaccessible, that sometimes even belts, some people have running belts where they have a few bottles strapped on. Yeah, they can just be, you know, uncomfortable. So whatever it is, you just want to make sure it's comfortable and easily accessible so that you want to take more in.
Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah, I definitely got to look down that Camelback route. I was hoping to go try some on, but all the Kathmandu stores are closed at the moment. So it's online stores only. I might just have to risk it and get one and see. Hopefully it fits and doesn't feel like it slushes around too much.
Well, yeah, I mean, asking ultra marathon person is the perfect way to go. I mean, my sister, Erica, I'm not sure if you had her on the show once.
I got her on, and when we were doing the podcast, it started pouring down so loud that you couldn't actually hear the speaking. So I'm going to get her back in. And then for everyone watching, I'm going to get Mike back in once I've completed all this and there's a little bit less social distancing going on. He's going to come into the studio and get onto the podcast as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, perfect. What other tips and tricks would you recommend? We've already talked about earphones. I picked up a good pair of over-the-ear plus earbuds, wireless, so with a good battery life and a good water resistance rating, so they're not going to short out when I sweat all over them. We've talked about running shoes. I might make a trip into Athlete's Foot if they're still open, just to walk on there or have a jog on their little special foot reader to make sure I don't need any special sort of shoes for the. But basically, I've got a couple pairs of runners at home. I've got the earphones. I'm going to sort out my hydration system. And awesome. Anything else that I need to be considering?
I think you've hit a lot of it on the head. You know, I mean, lots of the, you know, from working in strength and gym work is quite applicable to long distance running. Just make sure you keep, you know, looking at taking a step back and looking at your overall program. Make sure you're not doing, you know, you're not getting too intense on your speeds, because at the end of the day, in a marathon, you might lose 5 or 10 minutes in the last 2 or 3 kilometers, just because in the first 2 or 3 kilometers, you went out 5 seconds a kilometer too fast.
Wow.
So, I mean, focus on the overall picture and not too much at like the intense details, because you're aiming for a range of speeds. You don't know exactly what speed you're going to go, right? So, I mean, aim high, but, I guess, yeah, just do it. Do what's comfortable. And if, you know, as your runs get longer and you feel good, then that's when you can kind of go harder.
Yeah, Mike, none of this is going to be comfortable for me, mate. I can tell you now. Yeah. Right? But I get what you're saying. Geez, I think that's it. Oh, let me ask you a question. When you're training, do you, you know, you're saying in your head, hey, I want to get roughly this time. So you're saying then, you know, you might lose 10 minutes down the track if you go out just a couple seconds faster per kilometer early on. When you're in your competition, in your race, do you use a pacer like on your watch or anything like that, where you can sort of say, hey, I'm sitting at this time and with 10 Ks to go, if I'm feeling good, I can up the pace? Or do you just do it strictly by feel?
In my triathlons, probably not much so, because triathlons are more a tactical thing, but in running, I definitely do. In running, I will, you know, all the world records are negative splitted. So that means that you always end up, if you're going to hit a personal best, it's almost always going to be because your second half was faster than your first half. So
the second half of the marathon?
Yeah, the second half of the marathon is always faster than the first half. You look at any record, any 5K, 10K world record, it's always faster, because they don't necessarily go out conservatively, but they go out, you know, around world record pace, maybe slightly slower, and then they kick at the end. So the last, like, you know, few kilometers is always way faster. And in my training, I always try to emulate that. If I'm doing a hard running session, I will always start out the first few repetitions slightly slower than my goal pace for the overall like session. And then I'll always try to bring it home really hard, because if you go out too hard, then you're actually just training your body to fail and to fatigue early.
Okay. So what would you recommend then, if I come up with figure out the split for whatever the kilometer split is to get, 4 to 4 hours and 15 minutes. When I'm doing the actual marathon itself, should I be aiming, just slightly slower than that, or at that pace and then try to bring it home? Like, what would you recommend there?
Yeah, well, I would say at least the first 5 kilometers, you're going to want to start out. And sometimes this is hard because you're fit, you're feeling good, you're tapered.
Adrenaline.
And yeah, you got a lot of adrenaline, your heart rate's racing, you're not going to have as much of a problem where you've got a million other racers around you like you would in a big marathon. So that's a good thing. So, your heart rate's not going to be too high. But yeah, I would recommend starting out, maybe 5 to 10, 5 or 10 seconds kilometers slower for the first 5K. And then kind of like building in. So, when you hit your midway split, you might even want to be a little bit behind what you aim to do. And then from there, you really build it in, hey? So you kind of want your fastest, for an elite, you want your fastest kilometers to be at the end. But maybe for yourself, you want your fastest kilometers to be somewhere between 20 and 30 kilometers. Or 25 and 35 kilometers is where you really want to be hitting it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. This gives me a lot to think about and work on and get a bit of a schedule up. But training starts on Monday. Training starts in just a couple of days, 2 days. Whew.
What are you doing? What's your Monday session?
Well, I've got to figure it out, but I'm going to start with one of my shorter runs with a couple intervals in there. I've been told minute on, minute off, get a few K. I've got to see how I feel because I don't know how these old legs are going to how they're going to feel about me jumping straight into some reasonable length runs here. So I'll maybe the first week I'll have a bit of a plan, and then I'll try my best to stick to it, and then readjust as I go.
Yeah. Give me a message any week. I'm happy to even keep an eye on it week by week.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate that, Mike. That's great.
No worries.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate it. But like I said, we'll definitely get you on here. I'll be touching base with you during this whole training thing, but we'll definitely get you on for this is the podcast studio back behind me anyhow, in the office. For when after it's all said and done, we'll get you in here and we'll have like maybe a celebration podcast or something.
Sounds great. Yeah. When you go 4 hours, 14:59.
Or maybe 3:59. Who knows?
Yeah, 3:59. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you did that. So.
All right. Well, let's see. We'll aim high and we'll do our best. But thanks again, Mike, and I'll chat with you soon.
Okay. See you, Nev. Thanks.